Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast in association with the John Campea Show. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. The Designing Hollywood podcast show is dedicated to all things movies, the movie industry, and its talented professionals. Today's episode is sponsored by the Costumes Rental Corporation. Today's guest is an award-winning Canadian-Pakistani filmmaker whose debut film, In Flames, premiered at the 76th Cannes Film Festival as part of the Director's Fortnight. It marked the return of Pakistan to the Director's Fortnight after a period of 47 years. He is an alumnus of the TIFF Talent Lab and the Locarno Filmmakers Academy. His works have been screened and awarded in over 70 film festivals worldwide, including TIFF, Locarno, and BFI London. Born in Karachi and currently based out of Toronto, Kahn is committed to telling stories that amplify historically marginalized communities. The film In Flames, which is his feature directorial debut, revolves around a mother and daughter whose precarious existence is ripped apart following the death of the family patriarch. In Flames is also played at festivals including Toronto, Busan, Sitges, Helsinki, and South by Southwest Sydney. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome award-winning film director Zarrar Kahn to the Designing Hollywood podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Robert. That's a really intimidating bio you just gave, so I appreciate it.
I think well-deserved. Now, I have to say, I'm fascinated that you are both from a Canadian, Pakistani-based filmmaker, because one of the things that I've found exciting is when we're getting stories from places that we don't see a lot of stories from. I remember in terms of my experience with Pakistan in films, I remember seeing My Beautiful Laundrette back in the 80s, which was a movie about Pakistani immigration to England, and it was hard for an American to understand, wait, they're racist toward Pakistani people in Britain? Because we didn't have the same thing, and we didn't have what happened, in Britain and the colonialism.
It was bad.
Yeah, it was bad. And we didn't have that in the United States. And it was a really interesting way of I think filmmaking is some of the best way to learn about other cultures. And one of the things I thought about your film, now, first of all, I have to ask, did you shoot it in Karachi?
Yeah.
It was, I kept thinking about documentary style filmmaking in the early 70s, and William Friedkin came to mind doing things like The French Connection and how it was very evocative of New York at the time. And one of the things from the moment the movie begins, you really get a sense of the place and the time. And I've never been to Karachi, I've never been to Pakistan, but I was just floored by the evocation of the city and its people immediately. You just dropped me in to a world I'd never seen before, and it immediately, from your camera angles to the sound design and even the score, I felt, wow, this is something I haven't seen before, and I was immediately captivated by it. And, I don't know how you did it, but I want to find out. And I think to begin, did you grow up in Karachi? And if so, were you a movie fan growing up? And what were your influences?
I was born in Karachi, and then my family migrated to Canada when I was 10.
Oh, okay.
And then I spent the following 20 years moving back and forth between Canada and Pakistan every 5 years. So I moved back when I was 15 to Pakistan, moved back to Canada when I was 19, moved back to Pakistan when I was 23. And then I spent the greater part of the last 10 years in Karachi, kind of developing my voice as a filmmaker. And I moved back to Canada about a year and a half ago with the film. So the last decade for me has largely been in Karachi, and that's also where I've been growing as a filmmaker and learning about cinema. I grew up in a non-film family. My mom was a librarian. My dad is in finance. So I remember the first film I saw in a theater was Titanic, which was in Islamabad, which was a censored version, obviously, for many reasons. And I didn't really grow up watching world cinema. But after I graduated in a theater degree. And theater was really what I did through most of my childhood. I always really enjoyed telling stories. But what a lot of real theater kids will tell you, what they love about the medium is that, when the curtains close, you're never going to experience that story again. And that's what I hated about theater. I hated that when it ended, I could never revisit this story. So I started gravitating towards cinema. After I graduated from my theater degree in Canada, I moved back to Pakistan, and I was doing plays with my friends. And after that, we started doing short films together. And those short films were kind of my introduction, both to world cinema and also to like the kind of stories that I'm interested in telling. So I had a lot of success with a short film I made in 2018 called Via. It premiered at Locarno, and it's a festival in like the Italian speaking part of Switzerland. And it was my first time being invited to present my film at an international festival. And I remember going there and having my mind suddenly like blown wide open with all of the different global types of cinema and meeting people from all corners of the world. And that kind of set me on a journey of attending labs and workshops and film training programs all across the world, from Korea, where I was training with Indonesian Otura Maulisura,
Wow.
back to Locarno for their lab, where we met with Bong Joon-ho and John Waters, to TIFF, where I met with Deepa Mehta and
Wow.
just incredibly talented, generous filmmakers, and getting to meet them and then watch their films and learn about cinema and the medium of cinema this way. So for me, film was traveling and learning new cultures and learning new people, but also learning what I appreciate about Karachi and how I want to present Karachi. Because I felt a responsibility as a filmmaker from there and coming from a place that doesn't have a rich history of being shown cinematically. And I'm like, this is like the 5th largest city in the world, and people don't know anything about it. Like I was in New York for the first time 3 weeks ago.
You're kidding.
In Flames is Pakistan's submission for the Oscars for this year. Unfortunately, we didn't go all the way, but I was doing for-year consideration screenings like across America. And I remember driving into New York and being like, it's so weird because I feel like I've seen this city before because I've seen so many movies from here.
Right.
I
know how that felt.
That's what I wanted to do with Karachi. One of the things I wanted to do was show people what the city feels like. Not necessarily what it looks like, but what it feels like.
Well, there is an establishing shot where you're up high and you see, I think it's the largest wide of the whole city. I mean, and I was stunned by this particular shot because you can see like the highway and then all the that goes on forever. I mean, it looked like it was something out of Blade Runner, but in the hot sun.
Yeah,
and I was like,
city of 30 million people.
I was like, oh my God, I'd never seen that particular image of that city. I'd never seen that before. And it really, I mean, in terms of, like I was saying before we started, I think cinema is the way to easily convey the experience of people around the world to audiences around the world because of the way cinema works. It actually shows these things to you. And that's one of the strengths. I mean, I loved you did such a good job of immersing the audience in the world. And it was a world I'd never really experienced, just like you said. And that was, it immediately captured my interest. And I was like, oh, because like I told you, I went into this film cold, purposefully not knowing anything about it, because how often do you get to do that these days? I
watch a lot of foreign language movies, so I get to do it pretty frequently. But it's awful for me because I hate watching the big films because I come with so many expectations. Like I recently saw Poor Things, and I loved it. But man, I went in being like, this has got to be the best film I've ever seen. And I'm just really happy Yorgos delivered because it's worrying when you're watching a film after seeing the trailer, after doing all the pundits and stuff, like you go in with expectations. And I love watching films not knowing anything about them. I think it's such an interesting way to discover a film.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky in that I grew up in Seattle, and we had one of the oldest ongoing film festivals in the world. But when I was a kid, I'd get an annual pass, and I would see 200 movies in the month of May and June, and I wouldn't know anything about them because they were all Pacific Rim countries. They were from all over the world, and since I left and moved to California and went to college, I haven't had those experiences where I could just sit down.
Like you are eating, breathing films there. It's
But it's
Wow.
hard. It's hard to get unless films get picked up for distribution.
Yeah.
It's hard to get, or you go to a Laemmle theater or something like Greg Laemmle, and that family is still showing a lot of world cinema. But it's hard to find movies unless it's award season from all over the world. I mean, we do have a small Indian community, well, a big Indian community here. So Bollywood movies will play theatrically. There are places where you can go see Chinese films in the theater,
Yeah.
but you have to seek it out. It's tough, and to find a film from Pakistan like yours, I don't remember In Flames playing here. It might have. It
hasn't yet. We did like a couple for your consideration screenings, but it hasn't released in the States as yet. We're releasing in April.
Oh, okay.
So I'm excited to get to bring the film to North American audiences. We had our U.S. premiere at Palm Springs a few weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
And
that's a great festival.
It was tremendous to be there. It's so beautiful. And really the audience is really experienced cinephiles.
Yeah.
So sharing the film with them, it's the second time the film is screened in some ways in North America. We had our world premiere TIFF. Our North American premiere TIFF. And for me, whenever I'm screening In Flames North America, it feels like a halfway homecoming because I grew up between North America and Pakistan. So I feel like in some ways the audience for the film, it resonates better in those two countries.
Right.
Because it's pieces of me. So,
well, I'm curious. I want to delve back into when you first started making films. Did you learn camera techniques? Were you editing? What was it like for you to start delving into the medium of cinema?
I was doing it all, which is stupid, but you learn it all that way.
Yep.
The first short film I made, I used my student loan money to buy myself like a Canon T3i.
Nice.
And I got all my friends and I'm like, we're going to make a movie. And I wrote a short film, and then they were like friends who were actors and were acting in the industry in Pakistan. And they were like, you need more than you and one person, right? And I'm like, why? And then I deeply discovered why. But it was kind of like this organic way of just leveling up and getting bigger by, doing project by project. And one thing I continue to do to this day is I edit my movies. Even within Flames, I worked with a co-editor, but I did the initial assembly on the film, and I also did the first pass edit. And then I gave it to him to do a second pass, Craig Scorgi, who's now nominated for a Canadian Screen Award. And then we did the third pass together. Because I feel like editing is like the final writing of the film.
Yep.
For someone who's so deeply involved in the process, it's not something I can let go. And I tell my editor, you want me to do the first pass because it's where I see all my own mistakes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you do the first pass, I'm going to be like, why can't we fix this? But yeah, it was learning about all departments in a really organic way. And then being attracted to writing, to directing, to editing, as where, really the roots of the story both grow and kind of flourish. And then finding incredible collaborators along the way. And the journey of like our DP on In Flames, who this film wouldn't exist without, Egil Nurbolatova, the journey of finding her came through me attending a lab in Korea, meeting this incredible director from Kazakhstan, whose films I watched, being like, wow, these films are so beautiful. And then her connecting me with her cinematographer, who's from Kazakhstan, and her flying in when there's a revolution in Kazakhstan to come and make our movie in Pakistan. So there's all these like tenuous kind of incredible things that had to happen for this film to exist.
Well, I just love hearing you say that, because that's kind of the way I hope the world will work. One of the things I loved about going on the festival circuit, that's how you, like you just said, you meet people whose work that you like. I've only made one film, but I edited the film my DP shot. And I told him, I said, dude, if I ever make a movie, you're going to shoot it, and I think that's the best way. And plus, again, you have not a Western perspective, and I think that having other perspectives always sort of, I think, accentuates the work that you do. Was there a language barrier between your DP and you?
A little bit. Like English was our common language, but really our common language was movies. So when she arrived in Karachi, we were watching films together that were the reference films for me.
What were some of those films?
One is Tuki Buki, by Senegalese filmmaker. I think Usman. I can't remember his last name, but he's like the father of modern day Senegalese cinema. Another film was The Big City by Satyajit Ray, who's
Yep.
an icon. And then more contemporary work like Atlantiques by Madi Diop, as well as Titan by Julia Ducournau.
Yes, that which I did read about you saying that was an influence, and I'm like, that's interesting. Okay.
I mean, it's far away, but there's elements of body horror and In Flames as well. That's definitely inspired by that work. So it was kind of like, marrying all of these different influences into what I saw to be the journey. But yeah, we bonded over food and films, and that's my favorite way to get to know people. And then
you and me both.
And then we visited all the locations I wanted to make the movie in. And I remember after she read the script, she's like, okay, I understand what you're trying to say. Because one of the things I told her is this film says everything I want to say about Karachi and all about my experiences in Karachi. And then after we wrapped principal photography, she's like, I understand what you're saying because now I feel like I have seen the city from end to end. I've seen it from the beach to the urban to like schools to hospitals. Like I feel like I have an idea of this place. And her lens is so incredible. And it was really important for me to have a female lens behind the camera because given the fact that the film is dealing with femininity and the female experience, I feel like the DP is really the eye into the world. And it's the director's job mostly to craft performance and also to lead the team. But ultimately, the eye is female. And that was a choice that me and my producer, Anam Abbas, were thinking about at very early stages.
Right. And I think it definitely comes through. Now, how, after your shorts and traveling around the world, how did you finance In Flames?
It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. So initially, we thought we would go through the European co-production route, which is something that a lot of Asian filmmakers do these days, where they're able to access funds from global funds, like, a little bit from here, a little bit from here, and like piece it all together to the point that, it ends up being quite an expensive production. Like it would, run maybe like just under $1 million. And another Asian filmmaker I know from Malaysia did this very successfully, but it requires producers who are really adept and have navigated that system before. My producer's incredible, but this was also her first fiction film. So for both of us, we're on this journey of making our first fiction film. She'd made feature documentary, but never fiction. And then we were in Berlin attending another lab where we met an Indian Canadian producer named Shant Joshi. And he was like, you guys both hold Canadian passports. Yes, you both live in Pakistan, but you're both dual nationals. So you should consider doing this through the Canadian system. So Canada has a grant for first features, which is a micro-budget first feature grant. And because of the success of my short films, I was able to tap into that.
Yeah.
So we're 100% Canadian financed. Largely through Telefilm Talent to Watch, and then we picked up small pieces through other federal and provincial funding.
Nice.
But really operating on a very tight budget, even by Pakistan standards. But yeah, that was how we were able to make this film because making films like this is rare in Pakistan. We're now starting to see more and more films, and in some way we're having a Pakistani renaissance. But we also really benefited from changes in the Canadian financing landscape, which came as a result of BLM. So the Black Lives Matter movement spilled over into Canada, in which suddenly there was more opportunities for racialized creators like myself to tell stories in our terms.
Wow.
So many things had to happen in the world to allow us to make this movie.
Now, Pakistan is predominantly Islamic?
Yeah, it is.
So what I found really interesting is maybe just because I've been interested in I haven't seen a lot of films in my life coming out of Islamic countries, and I've sort of been on an Islamic film tear. And I think it started with a Turkish horror film called Baskin that I
Haven't
saw.
seen it.
Oh
Where
man,
do I watch it?
it's on disc. I saw it on Netflix. It's
Okay.
hard. It's hardcore. I mean, it was like talk about body horror. Clive Barker. It
Gonna
starts
write
out.
this
I
down.
I didn't know what
Basket?
Baskin, Baskin, which I think is police raid or something. I don't know what the word
Okay.
means, but it was one of these movies. A friend of mine kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You should watch this movie, but don't read anything about it before you watch it.
Okay.
And
Well,
I'm like, okay. And I thought it was just about a bunch of racist cops.
mm,
It's more than that.
yeah.
So, and it was a horror film. And then, I recently told you I watched Ali Abbasi's Holy Spider,
Hmm.
which was interesting because it was a docudrama based on a true story,
Hmm.
but it deals with the horrible injustices of the patriarchy of Iran.
Yeah.
And one of the things that when I started watching a movie, again, not knowing anything about it, it's a family. They've just lost the head of the family. And I thought it was going to be like a mother and daughter bonding experience, even though it was called In Flames. So I'm like, does this mean their life's going to go up in flames? Like, I didn't know. But about 15 minutes in, there's this great sense of dread that started to descend into the story. And then I realized, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I thought you did a really great job drawing in the audience. I mean, meaning me. I mean, I'm a very experienced film watcher. I've been watching films for a century, and I'm seeing this thing, and the sense of atmosphere that you created through the way Karachi was presented, the way this family is presented. And what I thought was really great is that your lead actress, I mean, first of all, she's beautiful, but she was always she was always wrapped up and she looked very angelic in a way in this environment that might not necessarily have been a place where an angel is supposed to be. And that was something that
Where tough angels are.
well,
It's a hard city that needs hard people.
yes. And this was something I'll tell you what really struck me. And when it really it was the scene where she was driving by herself. And she's stopped, and obviously she's going to school, she's studying, and she's very serious about it. But a guy in the middle of the day smashes the window of the car in with a brick and is trying to grab at her and then I'm like, oh, because you forget she's not supposed to go out unaccompanied, and because of the rules of an Islamic country, and then it made me realize, oh, this is a malevolent, dangerous place for her and her family. And
I mean, I would caveat that Pakistan is Muslim majority and Islamic, but it actually has a dual government system going.
Yeah.
One which is British, which is a legacy of colonialism, and in that system, which is like part of the legislation that you can tap into, on the books, we have incredible rights for women.
Sure.
Incredible rights for women in like human resources. It's one of the few countries in Asia to have a female head of state. But that being said, culturally, there's a different set of expectations.
Sure.
So that's why you see this kind of dichotomy where part of, you'll see women driving in Pakistan in urban centers, but simultaneously there's this cultural backlash of patriarchy.
Yeah.
And that's what Mariam, the lead, is fighting against. Her dreams, which she knows are possible technically, and the culture that tries to repress her.
Yeah, I mean, now is it true that you had made a short film with the same character but played by a different actress?
It is true. It is. So I made Dia in 2018, which was kind of my breakout short, and that actress, both the actresses were initially attached to the film. Only one of them was able to take it on, Bakhtawa Mazhar, who plays the role of Fariha in the film, the mother.
She was great too.
For both of the leads in Flames, this is both of their feature film debut. For Ramisha, it's her first time being on camera. She's never been on camera before, so she's so incredible. And to have the opportunity as a director to work with people when they're at this stage in their career, and we're all growing together. And the reviews that both of these actresses have gotten, it's been such a soul-affirming journey. Yeah, I mean, Ramisha's incredible. So is Bakhtawar. They're just going to skyrocket from here. You know, I've been happy. I've been part of it.
You know, here's the thing. Casting, people tell you that, you know, casting is 9/10 of the process. I thought this film was extraordinarily well cast. All of the actors they brought that, again, verisimilitude. They were all believable. What was the process like for you to find your cast? How did you go about casting them? Were they people from the theater? How did that work for you?
So because my company and I've been living in Karachi for the last 10 years making short films, most of this cast I've worked with before in short films. I'm the kind of person where, like, if I like someone and they're talented, I kind of never want to let them go.
Sure, absolutely.
So I've worked with Bakhtawar in like 2 shorts, Adnan Shah Tipu, who played the role of Uncle Nasir in 1 short, Muhammad Ali Hashmi in 2 shorts, who played the role of Salim. A lot of the people are people that I kind of met as I was developing my voice as a filmmaker. And then Ramisha was the one person who, you know, we lost our lead because of stuff that she was going through. She wasn't able to stay in the film about 2 months out. And my casting director, Muhammad Ali Hashmi, who also plays the role of Salim in the film, you know, he sent out a notice in his own kind of theater network. And around, I'm going to say 2 months before shooting, we met Ramisha through like a Zoom where I had my shitty Pakistan internet and she had her shitty Pakistan internet. And like, I can't really see her. But I remember after those 45 minutes just being like entranced. And I'm like, if this is what she can do over a Zoom audition, I don't even know the capability of this person in person. And then I remember the first time we met, which is when she came in for a table read. And in person, you know, at that point, now she's grown a lot as we've been traveling with the film. But at that point, she was this very quiet presence, you know, really intimidated to be in the space. And then the second she started reading her lines, she transformed. So I think, you know, with her, it really is, there's a lot of overlap in her own personal experiences with this role. Being an eldest daughter who lives in Karachi, and just her having this kind of wealth of experience. But I lucked out with the cast because they're all so incredibly talented, and each of them brought so much to their role. And they're also all really lovely people. Like, they're all people that now we've been traveling with the film for 1.5 years, and I'm so grateful to see all of their journeys, you know, through this film. Like, when we met in Cannes, it was after I'd come to Canada to do post-production for the film. And at that point, it was this really incredible reunion where we had team members from Canada, from Kazakhstan, from Pakistan, all meeting for the first time in this like grand pantheon of cinema. And it honestly felt like this really strange fever dream. But it was magical, and it's something only movies can do.
Well, I have to say, I mean, she was. It's Ramisha. She's on screen basically the entire film. You know, seldom. I mean, there's a few scenes like when the mother goes to see the lawyer, and but she's extraordinary. I mean, her face is you can't take your eyes off her face, and there's such a soulfulness in her, and you can see that she's kind of a woman out of time and a woman out of place, but yet she's constrained by where she lives. I mean, I was like, when the movie was over, I'm like, I really hope she gets to go to medical school, and maybe they'll make the Karachi version of ER, and she'll run the hospital like her character.
I would love that.
I mean, kind of like the Saatchi Rape, make the Apu trilogy, but make it about her. Or 28 Up. You'll make a film about her like every 20 years about where she's at in her life. Because I love.
You don't have to ask me twice. That sounds fantastic. I would watch that every 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, kind of like Boyhood or the after the Linklater trilogy. You know, I mean, but make like the Apu trilogy. So we'll be watching it in film schools. Well, I won't be, but students will be watching it like the Apu trilogy decades to come. But
yeah, Ray did so much and gave us so much. He's definitely a filmmaker that he's like, I feel like just incredible. I don't know how he did it, you know, like that kind of perseverance. Now that I'm in the business side of things,
oh yeah,
I don't know how he churned out so many films.
Me neither. And the Apu trilogy is still as resonant today as it was when it was made, what, 60
Yeah.
years ago or something.
Yeah.
One person I've got to I have to single out in the film is I guess you would call him your main would he be the main Uncle Nasser?
So he's famous in Pakistan.
That guy, I mean, I'm sure he's a lovely man, but what a dick.
Yeah.
Man, did I and she says, Miriam says, don't sign the papers. Just don't
Yeah.
sign anything.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where the tension in that, I'm just like, that was when I started to really clench up. The idea of paper, I'm like,
Yeah.
don't do it. I mean, you even, it's funny because there aren't horror tropes that you would normally expect.
Yeah.
But you don't lean into those yet. The suspense, I was like clenching up as I watched the film going, oh my God. And it, like I was saying, the sense of dread you create here's just this daily environment. It's, I guess you'd say it's mundane city life.
Yeah.
But
it can be suffocating. And that was something I really wanted to capture. And I remember when I saw the film after quite a while, watching it in a cinema. And I remember after it ended, just kind of like being like, whew, like kind of like a breath of relief. Because it's a tough watch, and it is capturing all the beauty of Karachi, but it's also capturing the horror and how you can feel trapped.
Oh man, every time somebody would go into like your white knight, your knight in shining armor, the character Assad, and it's funny because he starts out like this knight in shining armor, but then he immediately is like, well, why didn't you answer my friend request? And I'm like, and he was like, I guess like you, came from Canada. I was living in Canada, but I moved back here. And then immediately you're like, oh, even he's scary, and
what I wanted to say with that was kind of like, I feel like having grown up between two very different parts of the world, I really believe people are a product of the societies that they're from.
100%.
And you can only be as good as what that society expects you to be. And the character of Asad is being the knight in shining armor, as is the expectation from the society that he now finds himself in. And he's kind of playing a character in some ways. And then eventually we see him realize that Mariam does not need a savior.
Right.
She will save herself.
No, and you see that. Asad is how you pronounce his name. I apologize for my pronunciation.
Oh, no,
but I really liked that, the character and how you, I guess it's because you don't realize we have people here in America. It's like, well, smash the patriarchy. I'm like, you don't even know what a patriarchy is compared to what you see in these cultures, like Holy Spider and this film. And I only equate them because I watched Holy Spider within the last month.
Totally.
And so, you're both coming at it from different directions, but it was rather terrifying to see how trapped, these women are. And one of the scenes that really got to me was when the mother goes to see a lawyer. Like, look, I'm getting kicked out of my I've been completely swindled by my own family member. I'm getting kicked out of my house, and I know I need your help. And the way you play that when she reaches out and it's very subtle, but it's obviously very, exactly what's going on there. And I'm like, I was infuriated. That this woman has done nothing but shown she's a mother, and she's done nothing but be a good mom, like you would expect, and she's allowed her daughter to be independent and study and be her own person. So I found her to be very sympathetic, and I really liked her, even though she was a little, she wasn't. She thought, oh, well, it's going to be fine.
She wasn't doing enough. She wasn't street smart in the way that she needed to be.
No, she wasn't. And I understand that, because she wasn't maybe allowed to be because of the life she was leading. Her daughter was, though, and she said,
I think it's also like if, the mother had like a destabilizing trauma, which kind of resulted in her pulling back from the world in a lot of ways.
Sure.
it made Mariam kind of have to carry a lot of the burden of keeping their family together. And, when someone has to do that, they have to be street smart. And with, when we talk about the patriarchy, one of the reasons I stayed on the journey of making the film was being rooted in both, Pakistan and North America. I remember when Roe versus Wade got overturned, and my sister lives in the States, and just being like, wow, things are changing everywhere.
Yeah.
And systems of oppression, which is what the patriarchy is, but every country has their own version of a system of oppression.
Sure.
It felt like there was a need for this film to be made and for it to come out, because it felt like we were seeing similar systems everywhere with like slight differences,
Right. Or different, the emphasis is in different areas on different things.
Exactly.
But I mean, now let me ask you, you brought up the idea of body horror. Now, one of my favorite directors and the king of body horror is our favorite Canadian director, David Cronenberg, who I've been watching his films since I was a kid. The first movie I saw of his was his first feature. It's called They Came From Within Here, but Shivers in Canada from 1975. And then The Brood is still, I think, one of the great movies ever made about the destruction of a marriage. That also is an incredible horror film, literally about how do you take internal trauma and externalize it. I mean, the man's a master, and he's got a new movie coming out I can't wait called The Shrouds. But you brought up body horror, and there's a couple of instances like when they go see the healer. Man, that was hard. That was so creepy, and it was
not easy to shoot either.
I can only imagine. I mean, now that's another thing. This film was really great because you never went too far, but you were able to find the horror in the everyday and sort of amp. And that was one of those things where it was so extraordinarily violating and creepy, and the way you shot it. How did you, like, in your own mind, from writing it and then working with your cinematographer, and then, as you said, doing the first pass editorially, when you approached a scene like that, and let's just say it involves somebody unwantingly violating someone else's personal space. I'm not going to say. How did you approach doing that scene?
I think it's because...
And was it written that
violation
way?
Can be such a small thing.
Yeah.
But the psychological impact of it can never leave you. And that was definitely a guiding light. But also knowing that we wanted the violence to be inflicted, this is awful, on the audience. We wanted the audience to be knee-deep in the violence, not expose our characters to it. So when you're witnessing the violence in this film, you're seeing it on the characters' faces. And the characters' eyes are your eyes.
Right.
So we're not seeing the violence in a wide, but we're seeing it happen to them, and we can kind of enjoy that violence. And that was one of the issues, to be honest, I had with Holy Spider, where we were looking at the violence in some ways voyeuristically.
Oh my God. Yes, 100%.
And
it was really hard to watch.
Watching that film, because I want the audience to be the one uncomfortable, not the audience to be, in some ways titillated by the violence that we see on screen. And that's another aspect. That's one of the darker aspects of horror cinema, of the legacy of what horror cinema has been.
Yeah, sure.
And for us, the film, the horror is shown on the faces of our two leads. And that's really something that I wanted. It was a conversation me and my DP were having when we were creating our shots and considering what's the impact of the film and who do we really want to make uncomfortable. And unfortunately, it's the audience.
Well, no, I think fortunately, I think it was a great approach. Even the accident in the film, there's an accident in the film. It was not.
It's just here,
and it's not voyeuristic at all. And one of the things that I really liked about what your approach was, you could look at it and say it was psychological, like it was in her mind, maybe, even though, or not. I mean, you clearly, you kind of, but in a way, you leave it up to the audience, whatever you're going to bring into the movie and the way you want to approach it. You could say, okay, this is very much rooted in reality, or there's definitely a fantasy element to it if you choose to accept all of that. And it was, I really appreciated that approach because it was, for me, it was unexpected when I watched the movie. But the sense, I guess I'd have to ask you about Karachi. First of all, how was Karachi as a production partner? Was the city open? Do you have to get permits? And did you have to like have a first AD block off the streets? And were you using, what about extras and scenes? How was that?
So I've been shooting short films in Karachi for the last 10 years. So kind of learned how to navigate a place, you know. There is an aspect of permits where you work with a local police station. And we definitely had police coverage when we were shooting some of our larger scenes.
Mm-hmm.
We were also shooting in some locations that have never been shot before, like that really oppressive apartment building where, you know, you can't see the sky and the buildings go up forever. I mean, God, man, when we finished shooting there, we were like all breathing easier. We were there for a week, and you felt really like, I'm trapped. How do I get out?
Right.
And no one had ever shot there. Karachi for me is like, you know, I feel like I'm very pro making short films because my short films really, I shot at a lot of the locations and did a lot of the things that I wanted to test out in my feature. So, you know, I'd shot at the beach before. I'd shot in open highways. We did have a great AD team. There were 3 ADs together who were navigating people and closing off sets because we had some really difficult scenes, you know, that like were in densely urban spaces where we were doing things that we can't have a lot of people watching. So there was definitely an aspect of, you know, telling everyone we're shooting a mayonnaise commercial, which for the Pakistani version is like saying we're just shooting a TV drama, because there's this bustling TV drama industry. It was a 30-day shoot. We did have COVID halfway through. And then had to but we didn't have the budget to close down. So we had to restructure so that talent who got COVID, you know, could now take 2 weeks to test negative and return at the end. We're lucky it was a minor supporting character. I got my first migraine while we were making this movie.
Oh, no.
But it was, I mean, now it's been 2 years. We shot it in February, right before I turned 31. So we started shooting February 1st. And I just want to go back to set. I'm like itching, like to get back. But it was a dream and a nightmare. Yeah, it was both.
Well, I mean, look, people say sometimes that the city is a character in the movie too, and I would definitely say there's even some Karachi was that, but there's even I really liked it was sparing, but you used some drone shots, you know, where you got and look, I think that when people look back at the cinema of the aughts and the teens of the early part of the 21st century, people are going to talk about the overuse of drone shots.
Yeah.
I don't think you did that in this film. I thought you had a very judicious use of what drones brought you, and all they did was accentuate what you were doing, and they seemed to be very deliberate. You know, the shots.
I hate drone shots. I hate drone shots. So my DP was really fighting for them, and I eventually relented when I saw the footage in the edit.
Right.
And I'm like, it expands the scope of this story.
Yes.
And it places Mariam, in some ways, it almost expands her isolation, the isolation of her and her family.
100%.
Because you're like, oh, wow, there's so many people here, but there's no one who can help. And it's somehow just still them. So I was very anti it, but I'm really grateful we got that footage.
Well, one of the things that struck me too is that you cut to when they're going to the beach the first time, and there's like a drone shot from above, and you see them going through the rocky road that takes them to the beach. And what I was like taken aback, like wow, because you're in this oppressive Karachi, and then all of a sudden you're in like the desert in freedom, and the juxtaposition of that, the image was jarring, and I thought it was great. I'm like.
Yeah.
There's a beach this close to Karachi, you know, because
you're
like
45 minutes out, man.
You can go there on a scooter, and it was again, it was a sense of place and time, and you did such a good job of conveying that to the audience. Because for me, every time you went to a different location or a new establishing shot, I'm like, where are they now? You know, and I think you did a fantastic job of being evocative of what Karachi's actually like, I felt like I could, aside from, tasting it or smelling the what it smells like. I mean, I want to know, like, what does the food smell like in Karachi? Obviously, you can't do that in a movie, but
Your next film will have a lot of food. I love Miyazaki films, which I feel like are a food tour of Japan
right.
through animation, and I am definitely being like, I missed an opportunity there. But Robert, this has been so lovely. I really love speaking to you about the film. I do have to run,
Sure.
but thank you so much for your insight and for taking the time to speak with me about our small Pakistani film. This has been such a joy. Thank you.
It has been so great to speak with you. The movie is in flames. It's going to be coming out in April. Who's releasing the film?
It's being released by Game Theory Films.
Okay. And so we'll be able to see it in nationally across the United States?
Right now we're looking at a limited release across New York, Boston, LA, and Chicago.
Well, listen, it has been so great. Zarrar Kahn, thank you so much for being here on the Designing Hollywood podcast. And thanks very much to our sponsor for this episode of the Designing Hollywood show, the Costume Rentals Corporation. The variety of costumes at Costumes Rentals Corporation is expansive. CRC is recognized worldwide as the premier supplier of military and police costumes and uniform rentals. Costumes Rentals Corporation takes pride in its commitment to each customer, helping to produce the type of exceptional look needed for a successful production. A special thank you to founder and executive producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder, costume designer, the legendary Marilyn Vance, and of course, John Campea from The John Campea Show. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in to the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you can find me on Instagram at rmburnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or on YouTube at PostGeek Singularity. Thanks very much. Like, subscribe, and give us your comments. What would you like to see on the channel? Right down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing Hollywood.